Good to see you. I didn't know if anyone was coming. This is great. Welcome to another year of Lunch and Learn. This is our first one. We took off for the summer. I'm very happy to see you and to share with you what I did last week. It was something that I've really never done before. And I'm happy to talk about current events as well in terms of what's been happening over the last few days, and answer any questions to the best that I can. Now, the last time I was in Israel, before last week, was the end of July last year. And when we were there, I told my wife, "Don't worry, nothing's going to happen." And it was just after, if you remember, the Hezbollah had bombed a Druze school, and all those Druze kids were killed by Hezbollah. And I came in, I was going right after that. And I said, "Don't worry, nothing's going to go crazy over that. Everything will be fine." And then when we were there, Israel killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, which was like the first time Israel struck in Tehran. And Tehran vowed to respond. And I'm there as they vowed to respond, having told my wife and my parents, "Don't worry, nothing's going to happen." I stayed a couple days after on my own. So when I was there on your dime, I stayed at a very nice hotel. But then when I was on my own for a couple of nights in Jerusalem, I stayed in a hotel that wasn't so nice. Great location, but there's a hotel right across from Hebrew Union College, where I went to rabbinic school, kind of right across from where the King David is. It's called the Eldan Hotel. And from the outside, it looks very nice. And, you know, the King David Hotel, if you're not going with a group, it's like $900 a night. The Eldan was like $150. So I stayed for 2 nights at the Eldan. What a dump. Oh, it was terrible. So I go to the guy at the front desk. This is after Iran is vowing to respond. I said, "Where's the bomb shelter in this hotel?" He said, I don't know. I said, What do you mean you don't know? Iran's about to... I didn't sleep all night because, you know, if Iran sends a ballistic missile, by the time you find out it's coming in the middle of the night, you've got 90 seconds to get to the shelter. It'll take you 90 seconds just to find your glasses, you know. And so what was happening at the beginning of the war was that Israelis were running out into if you don't have a bomb shelter and you live in a big building, you run out into the stairwell. So they're running out into the stairwell, and the first day they're remembering to take a book and to take their robe and to take their glasses and take everything they need. With 2 weeks into the war, they're running out naked, you know, and they're like, "Look, you know, it's 3 a.m. every night." So, and now they're coming from Yemen. So I wasn't there when there were any threats of any missiles, but Sharon, our executive director, was there a couple days longer than me, and he got one. So they come from Yemen, and Israel always knocks them out of the sky, but it's scary. And you still have to run to the shelter. So he got to experience one. Thank God I didn't have to deal with that. So that was the last time I was in Israel, and they got Haniyeh. So this time I go, tell my family, "Don't worry, nothing's going to happen." And Israel bombs Doha. And Sharon and I, now this was when we were first there. Originally they thought that they got all the leaders of Hamas in Doha. It turns out they didn't hardly get any of them. But I said to Sharon, the last time we came here, they got Haniyeh in Tehran. This time they got the whole staff in Doha. And people are going to ask us. Every time you go there, they kill the leaders of Hamas in foreign countries. So I said to Sharon, people are going to say that, and what we'll answer is, we can't talk about that. I can't. I'm sorry. There's some things I can't tell you. So one of the great things about these trips is you get to see some sensitive stuff, especially when you go to the FIDF. You get to see, Elena's here from FIDF. She's also a member of our temple, but she works with FIDF. But they show you some very cool stuff, and you're not allowed to talk about it. So that's the kind of stuff I use for this class. All the stuff they say you don't talk about, that's this. But what they really mean is don't write about it in the press. Don't talk about it on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or all the places you should be following me. That's my real job. I just come here, this is my hobby. My real job is Instagram. So the purpose of this trip was unlike anything I've ever done before. And it started out because I was so upset at how Israel was being accused of starving out the Gazans. Because I know for a fact how much food is getting into Gaza. I've read the reports. I've read Kogat. I talked to my cousin who's at the border. I talked to plenty of people in the army. I know exactly what's happening. And I also know how the UN lies about everything. So, for example, maybe they don't lie, but here's what the UN does. The UN will say, only 163 of our trucks were allowed into Gaza yesterday. And so, you can go look and see, yes, it's true. Only 163 of their trucks were allowed into Gaza yesterday. You know why? Because they only brought 163 trucks. But what they don't tell you is that 500 trucks from the other 8 organizations also went in. In fact, every single truck that showed up went in. And their reporting is only 163 trucks got in today. Is it a lie? Not necessarily. Is it the truth? Not even close. So, and one of the things I've learned is that whatever, there's not really such thing as news anymore. There's agenda. And whatever news outlet you're reading, pretty much you're reading a report that is their agenda. So do you remember when Israel accidentally killed a group of people from the World Food Bank, or the World Central Kitchen, or whatever it's called? So Australia said to the Israelis, we want to send our own team to investigate what happened. And Israel said, you don't need to. We already did an investigation. It was a terrible tragedy, but it was an accident. And sometimes in war accidents happen, and maybe don't drive around in the middle of a war field, and it reduces your chance of being killed. But it was an accident. And the head of the DC Central Kitchen, the famous chef, Jose Andres, said that Bibi did it on purpose because I've been critical of him. You think that's what Bibi does? So Australia said, we want to come investigate. So Israel said, no problem. Come. Sorry. The Australians sent the top-rated Australian investigate claims in other countries' war zones team. Whatever that. And they came over and they did their investigation, and they found out that what Israel said about the accident was true. So they came back to the Australian government and they said, here's our findings. And the Australian government says, okay, let's not report that. Let's leave it. And they didn't say anything about it until 6 months later. Well, you know what? A news cycle is old after about a half hour. By the time you got your newspaper this morning, it was outdated. I mean, the news is so far ahead. The news is instantaneous. So 6 months later, in a tiny little article, the Australians put out, oh yeah, the Israelis were, because to put it out right away didn't suit their agenda. And that's how the news works. Whenever you're reading the news, you have to ask, who's reporting this? Why'd they choose this story and how are they choosing it? What's their slant? I watch the news in America just to see what they're saying. But the news that I get from Israel is only from Israel. And usually only in Hebrew. Because if you listen to someone on CNN talk about Israel, and even say they used to work in the CIA, or even if they were a senator and they were on this committee or that committee, how many times have they really been to Israel? Maybe they've been to Israel 20 times. Ever for more than 3 days or 10 days? When they say which kibbutz it happened on, you already, what? Which kibbutz? I mean, it reminds me of, you remember Michelle Bachmann, the congresswoman from Minnesota? She said that she didn't like Obama because he had a lot of chutzpah. A lot of chutzpah. If you've never seen the interview of her on CNN saying that Obama has a lot of chutzpah, you haven't really lived. It's one of the funniest things you've ever seen.
The question is, what are they getting out of it?
Who?
The Australian government, for example. What are these people who are taking a piece of their or lying or withholding information? What is in it for them? What is the
Well, it depends who. It depends who you're selling to, or what your political slant is. I mean, the Australian government has turned against Israel. there's only there's a pretty good crowd, but there's hundreds of thousands of people watching this online. So we'll get the numbers later, but I think according to the Hamas health administration, there's hundreds of thousands of people listening to me control the media from here. Sorry. So Hasbara is used as a negative term, right? Of course. Right. Right. 100%. Everything is turned. Everything is turned against Israel in the most vile and disgusting ways. You should see the attacks that I get online. Because I try to say, Israel's getting attacked online. I'm going to try to at least use my voice the best I can to support Israel. I get hundreds a day, hundreds of messages a day, free Palestine. And I just write copy and paste. Good news, we did in 1948. Good news. And then I block them. But I've actually been having a very nice time with it because I put something out and then I get all these horrible comments and stuff, and I pretend that when I was teaching last year at University of Miami, I just grade them. So someone will write like 10 paragraphs about why Israel's committing genocide, and I'll just write poorly articulated or weak argument or something like that. Okay. Yeah, poorly conceived. So I decided if I can't go over there and prove that there's no starvation, I'm going to try to do what I can for Hasbara, for Israeli diplomacy. So I went over for one meeting. I went to Israel for 4 days to have one meeting. And I met with a woman. Now, what I'm going to tell you, this really isn't for public consumption. I'm being serious. Like, this is really, I don't want this to get out. That's why we're broadcasting it online for anyone who wants to see. But I'm actually going to turn this off for a second. So I went over to meet with someone at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I set the meeting up through the Miami consulate. And I told the Miami consulate, listen, we're losing. And you're not just losing America, you're losing American Jews. And I'm not really in a position to help you with all of America, but I can help with the Jews. I'm the vice president right now of the CCAR, which is the Reform Rabbis Union, and there's a significant chance that I could be president in the next few years. I'm not going to be the next president because there's a president-elect. I'm just vice president. But I told her I have a very serious congregation, a very Zionist congregation, and I've been working on this for 25 years, and there are a lot of other rabbis like me, and we're ready to help you. But you need to work with us. So I went to meet this woman, and I thought they were just going to, pawn me off with some clerk. So I called this guy named Lior Chayat. Any of you remember Lior Chayat? So Lior Chayat was the Consul General of Israel to Miami. And he's now the head spokesman for the foreign ministry in Jerusalem. So I called him up. I said, "Look, I'm going to be in this building. I don't know who they're giving me to meet with, but I'd like to see you while I'm there." And he said, "Well, you can't. I'm going to be in America." And then I saw on Facebook he was at a baseball game in D.C. So, all right. Well, I'll go to Jerusalem. I could have just flown to D.C. to see. So he said, "Well, who are you meeting with?" And I told him the name of the woman. And he said, "She's my boss." Whoa. So I go into the ministry. I walk in the door. And I've been there before, but there's a little security area. The security's no joke. Because outside, before I'm taking a picture of me by the sign that says Ministry of Foreign Affairs, almost got arrested. If you ever go to a government building in Israel, don't film. So anyway, the guy came out and yelled at me. I told him, "No, I have an appointment." So he says, "Sit here." I sit there for 15 minutes. I said to them, are you going to, what's happening? They said, we don't know. I said, well, so someone else walked by and said, who are you meeting with? And I told them, I said, I'll take you to our office. So this woman took me to the office, and she said, I was calling you. Where you been? I said, I've been sitting in security waiting for you for 15 minutes. Actually, I was there for a half hour because I was 15 minutes early. And that's sort of Israel. Israel, if you wait around for anybody, no one's going to help you. You've got to just go do it. So I go into her office. She's a fabulous woman. She's a career diplomat. She used to be the Israel ambassador to Latvia. And she told me some amazing stories. And I said to her, I just flew here to tell you this. You're losing the Jews. And I have 50 rabbis, the most prominent rabbis, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, who are ready to work with you one-on-one. And I had a list of things that we could do together to fix Hasbara. And if she would have said no at that moment, I would have said, I just came here for nothing. And after I explained it to her, she said, I'm in. So we are actually going to have a Zoom call with these 50 rabbis and the foreign minister of Israel a couple of days after Rosh Hashanah. And then we're going to get all 50 of the rabbis to go to Jerusalem for a few days to meet with the foreign minister and his team to start working on fighting Hasbara, at least for the Jews, at least to make sure we keep all the Jews pro-Israel in America. Were any of you at Yaakov Katz last night? So I recruited him to be one of our advisors. Him and Tal Becker and Chaviv Redev Gor, these other well-known journalists in Israel, they're going to advise us, these 50 rabbis, along with the foreign minister. So the problem that we've had is I'm on so many different organizations that work to fight for Israel, but all those organizations have their own issues and their own slants and their own raising money. This isn't going to be an organization. This is going to be more like just like work in the shadows and just do stuff directly. So what we created is a direct pipeline between the rabbis of the largest Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox synagogues in America and the foreign ministry, so that we're on the same page, getting out the same message. The other thing we want to do is create a curriculum for every Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox synagogue in the country, in America, with the same Zionist curriculum. Doesn't matter if you're Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox who Jabotinsky was. He was who he was. Who's Jabotinsky? Who's Herzl? Who's Ben Gurion? Who's Rabin? What happened? What's Aliyah? How did all this stuff? And we want every kid in America to be learning, every Jewish kid to be learning the same curriculum so that they all know exactly what happened and what our story is. Because if you call me up 2 weeks before you go to college and say, I'm going to college next year and I might have some issues there, can you give me a history of the Arab-Israeli conflict? And I've got about a half hour, then I got to go because I need to be ready for school next year. No, I can't. Go read these 50 books. But if we had the right curriculum from the outset, so that's another thing that we're working on. So that was the purpose of the trip. And thank God it worked. Now, I had 2 other days. And since I was there, I called my friends at FIDF and JNF and Pardes. Any of you know what Pardes is in Jerusalem? I'll talk about that in a minute. I called some of my other friends. I said, I have some time. I'm going to be here for 4 days. Can you help me out? So FIDF came through in a big way. They happened to have a mission going on. So I joined their mission. So I went to, I was staying, my first 2 nights I stayed at my cousin's home in Tel Aviv. Now, if you're going to stay with your cousins in Israel, not too many houses in Israel are so big and luxurious that, you look forward to staying in. But my cousin invented instant messaging. Literally. He sold it to AOL for $400 million. And since then, he's done a lot of other great stuff. So his house is pretty cool. So it's like 3 stories, got an elevator, it's got a private pool. It's in a beautiful neighborhood of Tel Aviv called Afeka, which is, if you know where Tel Aviv University is, in the Ramat Aviv area, Ramat Aviv Gimel. spectacular. You know, if you took his home and put it in Pinecrest, it would be, maybe 1.5 million. It's not, maybe 2 million because it has the elevator. But there it's like 20 million because it's a different scale. And boy, Israel's so expensive. So I stayed in my cousin. How do I know these cousins so well? When I was growing up, my Israeli cousins, I had a cousin named Yechiel. He sort of lost his job, but he was a great singer and had a lot of Yiddishkeit and could chant Torah. So my grandfather, who was a conservative rabbi in Pennsylvania, hired him. His name is Yechiel, to be the cantor of our shul where I grew up in Pennsylvania. So he came over, moved to Pennsylvania, and his daughter, Inbar, was my age. So we were in school together from kindergarten to 7th grade. So we grew up together. And when she got to 8th grade, her family moved back he got a job, they went back to Israel. And she went to the army and so forth. After the army, she entered into the Mossad. And she met this guy named Iran. So Iran was in the Mossad at a different level than her. And while he was there, he figured out how to talk to people through computers. And then he created a company called Mirabilis, and they invented something called ICQ.com. ICQ, those 3 letters, ICQ, I seek you. I'm looking for you. I seek you. And he figured out how to instant message and then sold it to AOL, and that was really one of the beginnings of the startup nation. He was one of the first ones, and he made a lot of money. There was a time where they were our poor Israeli cousins, and now we're the poor American cousins. And, he made a lot of money. I have not seen a shekel of it. Not one something, At least for the temple, something. Nothing. All right. It's all right. It's all right. So they have 7 kids. Don't worry, they can afford it. They're not Orthodox. They're very secular. But my cousin Inbar, her mom died of breast cancer when she was young. And she wanted to have a lot of kids. She wanted to bring a lot of kids into us. So there's 7 kids. So Ayal, I stayed in Ayal's room. Where is he? In the army. So he's been in Gaza for the last few months. But he's now, I thought he was still in Gaza, but it turns out his unit was pulled out. He's now on the border of Lebanon, which is a much safer place to be than Gaza, although it's still no picnic. So I stayed in his room. And a lot of his army stuff was like around the room, because sometimes, a lot of times in the army, you can sometimes come home for the weekends. So it was a little surreal to be there. So I stayed there for a couple nights, and the first night, the next day I got up. We went to the Dan Tel Aviv. I reported live from the Dan Tel Aviv. Don't think I stayed there. I didn't. And then we went out with FIDF. Now, what I'm going to tell you is pretty crazy, what we did. Now, FIDF, they do stuff on these trips that you wouldn't get to do. But there's a base not far, a little bit north of Tel Aviv called Palmachim. Have you ever been to Palmachim? It's near the beach. There's a beach also called Palmachim. Palmachim is a very large base. I mean, it's like a city, so big. And there are a lot of different things going on Palmachim. One of the units that trains there is called Yahalom. So Yahalom is they're the only unit that's allowed to go into the tunnels. No one else is allowed to go in the tunnels. They're the ones who operate the drones and the dogs, and they're going into the tunnels and looking for the terrorists and trying to find hostages. But they're the only ones who are allowed to operate in the tunnels. They're experts at it. They're there. But we weren't there to see them. We were there to see Zeke. What is Zeke? This is crazy stuff. Zeke are the drones. So we went to see the drones. We go into this room and we meet with the commander, and he tells us all about the drones, and he told us about what happened on October 7th, and they showed us some video of it. It was really, I was ready to run through a brick wall for them after that. It was really intense. Then we got to go out and see the drones. And the drones are pretty big. Like a drone would be maybe about as big as this table. And they make a lot of noise. They're really loud, like a real loud buzz, and they travel very slow. So from Tel Aviv, where the base is, a little bit north of Tel Aviv, kind of by Nes Ziona, down to Gaza, it takes about 45 minutes for the drone to get there. They move very slow. And they have on the side of them these little boxes. And each box on each side has 4 compartments that each have 4 missiles. So every drone has 8 missiles that it can fire. And the boxes are very small. The missiles are, maybe this big. You wouldn't want one falling on you. But so they operate these drones. So then, this is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. They had these trailers. And inside the trailer is where they operate the drones. So what does that mean? It means there's a guy with a computer screen looking at Gaza, and he's flying the drone. And when he sees the terrorist, he hits a button, and it fires, and it kills the terrorist, or tries to blow something up. So we walk in there, and I thought, I'm a shoot a few, a few bad guys, So we walk in, and I'm like, okay, what do I care? Computer screens, who cares? We walk in, and there are 3 soldiers there, and they're operating. They're on a mission. And you see the screens, and it's Gaza. And we're standing, I walk in, I'm like, hey, how's it going? They're like, shh. And then, don't repeat this. I don't want this. I'm serious. Don't go. But I'm telling you, but this isn't for public consumption. But these 3 soldiers, and they have the screens, and they're talking. They all have headphones, and they're talking to God knows who, and they're pressing lots of different buttons, and they're doing lots of stuff. And after about a half hour, you hear them go, 3, 2, 1, launch. Which is shalosh, daim, echad, shager. And then, and then you see explosion and smoke coming up, and you hear someone say, direct hit. And I was watching it. I just couldn't believe it let us in there. It was unbelievable. So I was walking out with the commander, and I said to him, listen, how do you know that you just only killed a terrorist? How do you know you didn't kill 30 other people? How do you know that the terrorist kids weren't there? How do you know? So he said, we spend inordinate amounts of time. And he said to me, we know down proving to that the identity card of the person that we're killing, that the identity card of the person that we're killing, we know for a fact that he has it carrying it on him. That's how good our intelligence is. And we don't drop the bomb until we know that he's the only one that's going to die, or the only people that are going to die are terrorists. And I said, well, I want to tell you something. Everyone in America and around the world thinks you're just lobbing bombs up and bombing the whole thing indiscriminately. And he said, did you see how long it just took? He said, you were just standing here 45 minutes. Those guys have been there for 6 hours. They didn't drop the bomb until they were 100% certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this was the only person that was being killed. And it was pretty cool. Now, can I prove that? No. But is that what they told me? Yes.
If the drones are that loud, doesn't that give away the element of surprise? Or is it held at distance where they don't hear the drone?
I think it's a really good question. They're very loud. You can't miss them. Oh, I know why. I asked the same question. You know what they told me? Because they're very loud when we saw them taking off and landing. But they're so high up that they're at a point of high up that the Hamas doesn't have the wherewithal to take them out or to really even know. And over Gaza, there's so many millions of them. I mean, there are drones everywhere that, they're always being watched. And that's why most of the most of the Hamas people, they don't really care. They're underground anyway. Yeah,
Yeah, just to chime in, because I had the.
she knows more. Yeah.
No, I don't. I'm a late, like I said, at IDF, and it was an honor to send him. I had the privilege of being at the Palmachim base probably 2 weeks
Uh-huh.
before you. What we witnessed during that time was, of course, different. It's ever changing, but we actually witnessed in that same trailer that you're talking about, Hamas stealing an A truck. Again, we were there 2 weeks before they hijacked an A truck. We saw it. They were not able to drop something on them because the proximity to others. So I can honestly attest that that's what we saw. There are so many different kinds of drones. Everybody wants the Zeke drone. They want the Zeke for backup. The Zeke is so reliable and it holds that many missiles. But there are smaller drones that are being flown out of all different locations for different purposes. So just to shine some light on that, there's a lot of different things flying around up there, and they really can't be bothered to stop and check what's going on in there. And not all the drones have the ability to drop, you know, something.
Rabbi Barras, I mean, I've heard that, organizations like West Point have done studies and have said Israeli army is probably the most moral army of any army in the world. And I'm not a single issue guy. But
Yeah.
It's driving me nuts. Like why, like the group you're organizing with the rabbis, why they're not meeting with the CNN editorial board or something, figuring out a way to get to these amazing.
Well, that's why we're going to start. That's our goal. But CNN won't put you on because it's not the slant they're looking for. You know who was the most happy that Trump won the election? MSNBC. Because their ratings skyrocket. When Biden was president, their ratings went down. When Trump won, their ratings went right back up. It's all a game to them. It's all a business. There's no news. It's almost impossible to find actual news. It's all a game. So, and I'll say it in a different way too. If you've been following what's going on in Europe, especially in England the last couple of days, they had these huge rallies of millions of people rallying against the Muslim immigrants, right-wing, Brits. And the same thing are going to happen in France and in Belgium and so forth, and in Holland and everywhere. And the reason that the British, the Christians mainly, hate the immigrants is because the immigrants come in and they're getting all of these benefits for free. They're getting phones, they're getting contact lenses, they're getting apartments, they're getting everything, all these stuff, and the Brits have to pay for them, but the immigrants are coming getting them for free. Well, at the rally, they were burning the Palestinian flag. They don't care about Palestine. The Israel-Palestine issue is just like an excuse for the war that's about to happen in Europe between the Christians and Muslims, and here in America between the left and the right. But the one thing that everyone can agree on is we hate the Jews. We're the colonizers with our one colony. Yeah.
So first of all, you know nothing about real estate.
Say it again?
When you said the house is probably worth $2 million, you know nothing about real estate.
Oh, okay, yeah, no.
But so from my
I've got the cheapest house in Pinecrest. So
I think the reason we're losing so many Jews from a perspective of Israel is that we sit around intellectually saying, everyone's going to figure out we're right. While we're waiting for everyone else to figure out we're right, Hamas, Hezbollah, whatever they are, Qatar really, spent 20 years and billions of dollars creating the narrative.
yeah,
And controlling where we're going from media perspective. And
without
so I was in
without a doubt.
a number of years and worked in the private sector. And I can tell you, the U.S. military we do not have the patience that the Israeli military does. Fly around.
Nobody does.
We watch for a few hours from what we used to call the lunch trial. But I do it. And we just say, that's probably them.
Right.
So,
How,
and when we do it, it's,
how many times have you heard the expression, Israel has the most moral army in the world? Have you ever heard that? The fact that you have to say that is offensive. Because it's the only reason we say that. The American army is moral too. But you have to say it because they just assume that it isn't.
Remember at the beginning,
It's anti-Semitic to even imply that it's not. You wouldn't do that with any other country.
I remember Bibi said right after October 7th, we're going to fight them barbarically like they fight us. That was one of his first statements. We're going
Well, yeah.
old school. And of course they never did.
Well, we've given them a beating they're never going to forget. So, I mean, we've beat them down pretty bad. But the difference is, look at how, I mean, just for example, look at how Israel attacked Iran. Iran took out all their, military sites, intelligence sites, went for some of their leaders. Iran only attacked residential neighborhoods. They didn't go for army bases. They didn't go for it was only residential areas. Nobody's claiming their army's not, they don't have to say we have the most moral army. Nobody says that. I mean, there's not a shred of moral decency about them, but.
A couple of things. So the total destruction of Gaza, I don't really know what the whole thing is, why the total destruction. And in that destruction, how do they know that they are not putting the hostages in danger? Do they know where they all are? I mean,
Yeah. I think they do have intelligence on where the hostages are. They can't get to them for the most part because they've been underground. Do you know that even Britain, the British have been flying drones over Gaza the whole war trying to find the hostages. Everyone's helping trying to find the hostages. They know where they are and where they're not. And there's only a few places left they can be. But no, some of them, and because they've had some recent videos. But no, they don't know where all of them are.
and does Israel, want this land?
No.
I can't imagine that they would want it.
Nobody wants it.
So,
Ben Gvir wants it, but nobody cares what he thinks.
Jackie, I'd love to just address that real quick, if I may. So, I just had a meeting, I'm sorry. I just had a meeting on Sunday with Colonel Richard Kemp. Some of you might be familiar with him, but he's from the British Army and extremely well-versed in all aspects of military and things. So I was with him on Sunday and honored to be someone who is not Jewish yet, has spent the last 2 years of his career not as popular of an Instagram as Rabbi Barras, but he's been blogging and he was blogging from Gaza.
He's pretty.
He's catching up to you, I'll say.
Yeah. I'm not crying for him.
He went into great detail. He was at the Gaza humanitarian sites over the last 2 weeks and shared with us that the rubble and the destruction that you're seeing is mostly because every floor, every wall of those buildings, they spent the last 20 years booby trapping.
Sure.
So not only has the IDF been bombing those buildings, but actually Hamas has been bombing those buildings. And then, of course, who do they blame? However, they not only have rigged walls, floors, tunnels to blow, but at the same time, they had set up sophisticated camera systems, if you can imagine this. So with all the money that all the governments around the world have been donating to the Palestinian cause for the last 20 years, the money went to funding
You know, the story that I heard about the Australians and the press and the World Food Bank, I heard Richard Kemp's the one who told it to me. Yes? I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah. Sometimes. They filled some of them with concrete. They filled some of them with water. But not always, because they don't know if there's hostages down there. They've blown up, yeah, they've blown up tons of them. But I think the last I heard, as much as they've blown up, they've at most maybe only a third of it. Because remember, it's larger than the New York subway system and the London Tube combined. That's how vast it is. And you can imagine how much money they spent on that. You know, Gaza is as big as Philadelphia. So if you take all the billions of dollars that they spent on those tunnels, and you built schools and hospitals, they could have had an absolutely fabulous place to live. But instead, this is what they chose, to build tunnels underground and booby traps and cameras and stuff instead of schools. Like Elena said, when this war is studied at West Point, when it's over, it will prove that. It will prove that it was the most, humane effort, probably in human warfare. Yeah.
I'm listening to all this, and I get frustrated because I think you and your other 50 rabbis, wonderful idea. But I'm concerned. I look at my own family. I have a nephew, sophomore at UF. He is a devoted Jew. He is. And it's interesting because his mother is Chinese, but he is definitely a Jewish boy. His closest friend is the son of a local rabbi. And he is, what he's hearing and his positions, he is so sympathetic to the Palestinians. And it's killing me. And the information is not getting out on the college campuses or even in the high schools.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, you and the other rabbis, as large a congregation as you have, it's a small group compared to.
Well, that's why I have TikTok. At Jeremy Barras 1234. So I have Instagram too.
I'm really concerned.
Well, listen.
And I don't know how you go about reaching them, but you've got,
Yeah.
Chabad's on the campuses, and
Here, one sec.
there's lots, but it's not getting through.
Well, here's the thing. I totally agree with you, and that's why I think probably the most important thing that we're going to do, and when I was there, I also met with the people in the Ministry of the Diaspora, is to create this curriculum so that all the kids in America have the same curriculum of Zionism, and they know the whole story. Because if I'm at University of Florida right now, first of all, if I was not Jewish and I lived in America, I would probably be pro-Palestinian. Because everything I see tells me how horrible Israel is. And as a moral person, I would say, oh my God, look how they're, when I was growing up, I was anti-apartheid. Because everything that they showed me how horrible apartheid is. Well, now they're showing me that Israel's committing, apartheid also. I know, because I know what I know that that's a lie, but that's what it looks like. But if they had my curriculum that I dream of, then when they said Israel's doing this, that, and the other thing, I'm going to say, that's not the case. Israel colonizer? What are you talking about? That's not the case. Now, the most important thing, and the best thing for these college kids, is that they go on birthright. Because if you want to believe it, you have to go there and see it. And the good news is that I think somewhat like 1 million kids have already gone on birthright. Now, if you think about it, there's only 6 million Jews in America. We're now at the point where the first like adults went on birthright. And if it keeps going and keeps going, we will get to a point where all 6 million Jews that live in America have been to Israel, at least once. Now, you need to go 7, 8 times before you really understand it, but It's a start. But they have to have the right curriculum from the beginning so that when someone comes at them with the lies, they could say, that's not what happened in the 6-Day War. What are you talking about? Right? So, but we're up against, you're right, we're up against a tsunami of propaganda. Oh, yeah. That's the front lines. Yeah.
She has done a total reversal, coming from Miami, coming from Temple Bell. A total reversal. She is now at APEC in Washington, D.C. She has been
My daughter's there.
fabulous babysitter.
Yeah.
She's been to numerous conferences. Everything she has seen and heard on campus and in classrooms has turned her right around. And she's changed her major. She was a theater person. Okay, cool. She's kind of still a theater person, but now she's doing something with 3 initials, whatever, and it has to do with war and conflict. She comes from theater to war and conflict.
Military theater.
So, Grandma, hang in there
Yeah.
and keep talking to whoever, because if my granddaughter can do this at the University of Michigan, this can happen.
Well, you know,
It gives me hope for the future.
I'm trying.
What you're doing
trying.
is key, and a lot of us are sharing what you're doing. My kids are watching what you're doing. They're telling their friends to watch what you're doing. So, you feel like you're in a nightmare. I know we feel that way. At FIDF, we feel that way. And so we're going to be a lot more active now down in this community where it hasn't necessarily been the case before. They put us on the ground here for that purpose. But Rabbi Barras, who's sharing so much, our youth are hearing it and they're starting to spread it. And I think if we all just subtly, I know what you're doing, child.
You know,
It's working. But she assures me that it's working. Grandma, you don't know what's going on. And she's right.
well, do you know, we'll take 2 last questions and then we'll wrap it up. I'll just say one thing first. October 7th exposed the American Jewish community. We forgot peoplehood. And we, to a certain extent, replaced it with a tikkun olamish, I hate to say liberal, but a liberal approach that replaced our Jewish values. And this is actually what I'll give you. You can now sleep through my sermon on Yom Kippur. So you probably would have anyway, but I didn't say it yet. That was just the preamble joke. So what a lot of people don't realize, this is what I'm going to talk about on Yom Kippur, is that the Reform movement, the organizing principle of social action and social justice, goes all the way back to pre-World War I. And the reason why is, it goes back way further than that. Because the original Jews who came here and started opening up Reform synagogues in places like Charleston and Savannah and New Orleans and Baltimore and so forth, mostly the South and the Midwest, they had just come from places where they killed Jews, or places where the Jews were severely unaccepted. And they said, you know, we got a chance here in America. This is a better place. Let's try to do the mitzvahs that the Christians do. Let's go to the soup kitchen. Let's go to the homeless shelter. Let's help the orphan and the widow. And then maybe they'll accept us and they won't slaughter us like they did where we just came from. And it made a lot of sense. That was 100 years before Herzl. The problem is, now 200 years later, those values became so prominent that we forgot what's actually in the Torah other than those values. Those values are in the Torah. You have to do those too. But not those to the exclusion of everything else. And when you do those to the exclusion of everything else, you get Jews who say, I'm Jewish, but I'm not really Zionist. Okay, you could say you're Jewish, but you're not really Zionist if you're talking politics. But the whole point of the Torah is to get to Israel. That's the whole point. So the first mitzvah that God gives Abraham is Lech Lecha, right? Which means I'm going to give you 10 tests. If you pass all 10 tests, you're going to be Jewish. If you fail even one of them, you're out. The first one was Lech Lecha, Me'artzecha, Mimoladatecha, Mibeit Avicha, Asher Eretz Areka. Get up and go from this land that you're living to, from your father's land to this place I'm going to show you, which is Jerusalem. And if you don't go, you're out. You're not Jewish. So to say, but I'm not for that, I just don't, I don't get it. But that's what happened. And so then we have some kids who said on October 7th, wait a minute. Are you kidding me? What have I been thinking? That's the reawakening. Okay, so it's sort of, look, some people are still talking about it. It's not as big in the news cycle as it was because of the threat to attack Gaza City, because there was some more movement on the hostage negotiations, because of the thing in Doha, and a few other things. So it's sort of just that story kind of died out. Now they're still talking about it. There was an article in the New York Times about it a couple of days ago. They're still talking about it. But it's not as prominent as it was. And I had hoped, actually, that by now the war was going to be over because of the things that Trump was saying. But I can't tell you how many times Trump has said, we're this close. You know, and every time, so now his new excuse is, we're this close, but every time we're about to make a deal, Bibi blows something up. Well, okay. You know, the gates of hell are going to open. Today he just promised something else. You know, okay, fine. So I thought we were getting towards the end. I think a lot of people thought we were getting towards the end, that there was going to be a hostage deal. There's nowhere left for Hamas to go. But, all right, Ian, 2 more questions, 3 more questions, then we got to, 4 more questions, then we got to go.
So the comment about PR is critical. Even the great wars in the past had one photograph that collided with everything else. My war is Vietnam.
Yeah.
That picture of those kids with the napalm bomb, nude girls, everything, completely changed the ideas of the American public.
Yeah.
What is America doing in Vietnam?
Yeah.
The pictures of starving people and babies dying trying to get food from trucks is overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah, no doubt.
Unless we can get rid of those type of things which have unbelievable pro-Palestinian things behind it, those visuals are penetrating.
Well, take a look at some of the pictures of the starving hostages. And this is like par excellence what I mean. You have these Jews in New York voting for this guy who's an avowed anti-Semite, who's led cheers for free Palestine. And, you know, a lot of Jews in New York are voting for him. Rabbis are writing articles supporting him. And they have, because they look at his views and they say, those are my views. And that is because their Jewish values have been reinterpreted and rechanged to the point where they don't resemble Judaism anymore and are simply far left liberal values. And that's the replacement that happened over the last 200 years. And I don't blame the Jews in the 1790s and the 1810s for trying to fit in this country. It was a smart move. Because being slaughtered was no fun, and there was no such thing as Zionism back then. But for the leaders of our movement for the last 50 to 70 years, still doing it, they've let us down. And I think we need a new organizing principle.
I have a question. This is something else. I wanted to know your opinion. On Sunday, there was a group who left to go to Syria,
Well, I don't know. I heard something about that, but I don't know much about it. But the good news is that Lebanon and Syria are, well, the new leaders of Syria are not Zionists. I mean, these are a bunch of animals that used to be Al Qaeda. They are literally Al Qaeda. However, the greatest thing about them is they hate Iran. And as long as they hate Iran, they're not going to let Iran shuttle weapons to Hezbollah, which basically has left Hezbollah, neutered. And so they're a great buffer in between there. You know, the best buffer we used to have to Iran was Saddam Hussein. Getting rid of Saddam Hussein, as horrible as he was, who bombed Israel, he was better for Israel because he protected he protected them from Iran because Iran had to go through him to get to. So taking him out of he should burn in hell. He's a disgusting whatever, but he was a good buffer. So now you have the Syrians, and the Syrians say, we got a lot of enemies. We got a lot of problems. If we make a deal with Israel, that shores up a lot of our problems. Because if Israel has an interest in us being here, they'll protect us. If they don't have an interest in us being here, they won't protect us. Yeah, it's horrible. They're Al Qaeda. They're a bunch of animals, no question.
Okay, I would like you to say 5 things, I put 10, 5 things that you believe are true about this situation, because I hear about the, the information is distorted. The one thing that's true is that based on what you saw, they're doing everything they can to just get Hamas. But if you could say 5 things that you believe are true to counter all the misinformation, what we're seeing.
It's a very good, very interesting. Okay. So 1, 5, I don't know. Probably do 100. So, yeah. So there's no doubt. Look, my cousin, who I've known since he's a little kid, is a sweet little guy. And he dreams of, being an engineer. And he should be right now in university. And he should be, hanging out with his girlfriend and thinking about, getting married. And instead, he's in Gaza. And he does not want to be there. And to think that kids like him are purposely looking for innocent women and children and picking them off with their rifles is so absurd and offensive and ridiculous, is beyond belief. It's the same thing as imagining that our kids here in our school would do that. No way in hell. There's no way in hell. So the idea that Israel is slaughtering indiscriminately people in Gaza and that there's a genocide is outrageous. I don't believe that. And I also believe the numbers that the Israeli army has put out, that the ratio of combatants to civilians is the lowest in the history of warfare, and that includes America's war in Fallujah and all these other places. So the genocide is utter and complete nonsense. It's offensive, and it's even more offensive when you consider that it's really Holocaust inversion. To preach to us about genocide, we know genocide. It was our parents and grandparents who were slaughtered. We know all about genocide. So to preach to us to that is even more offensive. So that's 1. 2, the amount of food that has gone into Gaza, at any point, pretty much, there should have been like a 4 or 5 month supply of food. But what happens is when the food goes into Gaza, and by the way, there was no starvation in the beginning. No one really even talked about that because Israel let everything in. But what Israel saw was that the only way that Hamas could keep control of everybody was to control the economy. But the only commodity to control the economy in Gaza was food. So Hamas took control of all the food. And they've proven that there are storehouses and storehouses and storehouses of factories of food in Gaza that belongs only to Hamas. So I believe with all my heart that there's plenty of food in Gaza to feed everybody, but Hamas stole it. And every time the trucks come in, they hijack them and then sell them back to their people. So what they do is this. How do they keep their soldiers fighting? They need to be paid. Well, there's no money in Gaza, so how do you pay them? So what they do is they pay them their salary, and now they have their salary. They take their salary and they come back to Hamas and buy food. And they give them food. Then with that money that they just paid to buy their food, a few weeks later they give it back to them as their salary. And the money just keeps changing hands back and forth, and Hamas is just giving the food that's supposed to go for free. So yes, there is starvation, but it's caused entirely by Hamas. Entirely by Hamas. So that's a few things. Sure, what else are we accused of? I would say that the other thing that people say is this. So I don't know if I've enumerated 3 or 4, but here's another big one. A lot of people say Bibi's wrong about continuing this war, and he's prolonging the war for his own benefit, and even most Israelis agree with that. Now, the truth is, plenty of Israelis hate Bibi. It's kind of like Trump. Israel's 50-50. 50.1% of Americans love Trump, 49.9% hate him. It's pretty much the same in Israel. You either love him or you hate him, and the country's divided. Half love him, half hate him. If you would take Bennett or Lapid, I asked this question of Tal Becker yesterday. Tal Becker is the genius who represented Israel at the ICC. He's a lawyer, as part of the army. He defended Israel against South Africa in the International Criminal Court. And I was on a Zoom call with him yesterday, and I asked him this question. If Bennett, Lapid, or Gantz were prime minister, would they be conducting the war any differently than what Bibi's doing right now? He said, how the hell would I? No, he said, when Israelis come out and say, free the hostages, or when Israelis come out and say Bibi's a terrorist, or and they do. There are rallies every night in Tel Aviv, and around the country against Bibi. I don't think what they're really saying is, I disagree with what Bibi's doing. I think what they're doing is venting their frustration, that they can't take it anymore. And in Israel, Bibi and Israel made 2 goals for the war. We're going to destroy Hamas and we're going to get the hostages back. The problem is, you can't really do both. Because what happens is, if you make some concessions to Hamas, then they're going to harden up and not give the hostages back. The rest of the world will love you, but you're not going to get the hostages back. If you're hard on them, then maybe you will get some of the hostages back, but the rest of the world will hate you. So Israel's stuck in between. And by the way, for all the people that say Bibi has been so intransigent in not getting the hostages back, we've gotten about 80% of them back. We got almost all of them back. We started with 251, we're down to 20. Now, it's true 28 are dead bodies they're holding as well. They're a bunch of cynical animals, Hamas, but he has made plenty of deals to get hostages back. So to say that he's prolonging the war for his own political benefit and doesn't care about the hostages, I don't buy it. Because what would it take? First of all, every time he has agreed to get the hostages back, Hamas has reneged. But what would it actually take to get the hostages back right now? It would be leaving Hamas in power. And then it would build right back up right where we started. And we'd end up 6-7 years down the road being right back where we started. So what Tal Becker answered me was, he said, I don't know about Lapid, Bennett, or Gantz, but the question that you would have to ask them is, if you expect them to do anything differently in this war, you have to ask them the question, are you willing to end the war with Hamas still in power? Are you willing to do that or not? And what most people want is to have it both ways. They want the war to end and the hostages back and Hamas gone. Great. I want to have my hair back. But I mean, you can't have everything. Yeah, it's not. All right. I think we covered almost every single topic. We're out of time. We'll do the rest another time. Thank you all for coming.